We're picking up Dalam of Ace 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 lines off the bottom. So our shir today is dedicated by Akiva Noach and Karen Andrews in memory of Akiva Noach's grandmother. This is Elizabeth Andrews. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Bisham will have an aliyah. So let's pick up. So let's pick up V'Shimshon. So actually, it's right across from Tosfos Giruye. So it says the Gemara V'Shimshon Lav Nazir Hava or Shimshon not a Nazir. And I will say, remember again, one of the interesting things that came out yesterday, we spoke about a Nazir Shimshon and a Nazir Olam, which we're going to expound upon today. So the Gemara made it sound that, remember, there was an opinion of Rabbi Huda who said that Rabbi Shimon, who says that a Nazir Shimshon is not an effective Neder Nazirus. You can't become a Nazir Shimshon for the simple reason that Nazir Shimshon was a state that was conferred upon baby Shimshon when he was in utero, and he never actively accepted that state. So because of that, it's impossible for one to accept a state of Nazir Shimshon. So it says, Shimshon Lav Nazir. Is that true that Shimshon did not become a Nazir through an articulated statement? Yet the pasuk says that the child will be a Nazir Elokim from the womb. Now the Gemara assumes that it is Manoach, who is Shimshon's father, who is making that statement. So you see over here that Nazir Shimshon status can be achieved. Granted, it's a conferred status, but Lamaise can be achieved through the declaration, in this case, of the father. To which the Gemara says, no, Hasam Malachu de Kamar. That wasn't Manoach who said it, but rather, again, that was the Malach, the angel, who said that Shimshon was going to be a Nazir, and he was a Nazir even in utero. As such, says Rabbi Shimon, that therefore to achieve the status of Nazir Shimshon in this world is impossible. Now, obviously, the Mishnah doesn't agree with that because the Mishnah speaks about Nazir Shimshon. So the Gemara says, how do we know that? Now, remember, one of the interesting aspects of Nazir Shimshon, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is that a Nazir Shimshon is permitted to become Tamei L'meis, right? As opposed to a regular Nazir, who ultimately, again, cannot become defiled to a corpse, cannot come in contact with a corpse. A Nazir Shimshon is permitted to. So the Gemara says, how do we know that? Now the assumption is, we know that because Shimshon himself came in contact with a corpse. So asks the Gemara, so where do we know that from? So maybe because the pasuk says, with the jawbone of the donkey, I smote 1,000 men. Speaking about this miracle where Shimshon killed 1,000 Plishtim with the jaw of a donkey. So you see from here that he came in contact with the corpse. Dilma giruye garibu. I don't say maybe he threw the jawbone at the Plishtim, v'lo nagabu, and he killed them through throwing it at them, but he never actually touched the corpses. Ella mehacha, rather from here, vayach mehem shloshim ish, he killed 30 of them, vayikach es chalitzosam, and he took their clothing. So you see from here that obviously he killed them, took their clothing, which means he came in contact with the corpse. Dilma ashlechinon bereisha, v'hader katlinon, maybe he took their clothing first and then killed them. To which the Gemara says it can't be vayach vayikach ksiv. It says he smote them and then he took their clothing. I vidilma gosasin shavinon. So maybe he made them gosasin. Maybe it was that he brought them right to death's door, took their clothing and then killed them. So in which case again he did not become in contact with a mace. To which the Gemara says, Ela Gemara Gemirila. Rather we have a tradition. Gemara means a Masorah, that our tradition about the story was he first killed the Plishtim and then ultimately took their clothing, indicating to us that Lamaisa, again, a Nazir Shimshon is permitted to come in contact with the dead. The Nazir Olam Heichaksiv. Now let's go back for a moment. The Gemara spoke about this idea of a Nazir Olam. So Nazir Olam Shmo Keinu is a Nazir forever. Now one of the things that the Mishnah spoke about is that the Nazir Olam is permitted to go ahead and trim his hair. So asks the Gemara, the fact that a Nazir Olam could trim his hair, and when he does so has to bring 3 animals as karbanos, where do we know that from? The Sanya Rebbe Omer Rebbe said, Avshalom Nazir Olam Hayan. Avshalom, the son of David HaMelech, was a Nazir Olam. Shne'emar, Vahimikates Arva'im Shana. It was at the end of 40 years. Vayomer Avshalom El Melech El Chana V'Avshalom is Nedarim Shana Dati Lashem Echevron. So let me go ahead and fulfill my vows that I have promised, that I vowed to God in Chevron. Umegaleach L'Shneim Asar Chodesh. And Avshalom was a Nazir Olam, would trim his hair once every year. Shne'emar Vahimikates Yomim. Because he quotes over here the pasuk. The pasuk Vahi Mikate Yomim Liyomim. It was at the end of days to the days. And what does days mean? Top of hay. V'yolif Yomim Yomim Bate Arichalma. and we can Gzera Shava of Yomim over here to Yomim Bati Arichoma. We'll say Bati Arichoma are homes in walled cities. So the halacha is that under normal circumstances, all real estate transactions reverse back on the Yovel year. That's in order to maintain tribal integrity, because obviously, if real estate transactions remain permanent, if I'm from Reuben and you're from Binyamin, and I buy a piece of land from you, that means it transfers over to Reuben, which disrupts tribal equilibrium. So end of Yovel year, everything goes back to its original owner, with one exception. The one exception is Bati Arichoma, homes in walled cities. So homes in walled cities, if you sell your home in a walled city, you have up to 1 year to redeem it. If after a year elapses you do not redeem it, that sale is final and does not revert back on the Yovel year. Sefer HaChinuch Chizbadi explains the reason for that is walled cities were often border cities. In order for border cities to maintain that first line of defense, the residents have to know the city, residents have to know each other. Therefore, again, if there's a lot of property turnover, people don't know each other, people don't know the armaments of the city, and it compromises the security of Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, the Gemara says, the same way that Yomim by Bati Arichoma means a year, so too Yomim by Avshalom means a year as well. And Avshalom, who was a Nazir Olam, cut his hair once a year. So the Gemara says, Ma hasm yod beis chodesh, av kan yod beis chodesh. So we'll say that's the first opinion. So first opinion of Rebbe, that literally a Nazir Olam could trim his hair once every year. Rabbi Norai says, Megalech achas l'yamidov. Rabbi Norai says, no, a Nazir Olam could trim his hair once every 30 days. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Megalech me'erev Shabbos to erev Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi holds that a Nazir Olam could trim his hair once a week. Every Erev Shabbos. Why? Shekim Matzinu b'Menei Malachim shemegalchem Erev Shabbos to Erev Shabbos. Because we see that the sons of royalty, sons of the king, trim their hair every Erev Shabbos. We'll define each of these shitos in just a little bit. The Gemara says, "My time with the Rebbe. What's Rebbe's logic? Remember, Rebbe said Nazir Olam could trim his hair how often? Once a year. So where does he get that? Yalet mi bati arichoma. So he learns it out from the Gzera Shava of Yomim Yom. It says Yomim by Avshalom. It says Yomim by bati arichoma. Just like Yom by Bati Arichoma means a year, so to Yom by Avshalom means he cut his hair once a year. So the Gemara says, "V'ha Rebbe Huda Amar Ein Yom B'chus Mishnayim." So 1 second, but yet Rebbe is the one who said that Yomim at a minimum means 2. So how do you know that Yomim means years? Maybe Yomim means a couple of days. To which the Gemara says, "Hai Gezer Shava Mishum Koved Gamir." He says it doesn't make sense because you also remember the whole idea is Nazir Olam. The reason he has a license to trim his hair is why? Because at some point in time the hair gets very heavy. So it makes sense to say that we're referring to a period of time in which the hair could get heavy. After 2 days, nothing happens. But after a year, one could imagine something absolutely does happen. Ve'ema beis shanim. So maybe Yomim means 2 years. Dichsev ahimikates shnasayim Yomim. It says it was at the end of Shnasayim, 2 years worth of days. So maybe days by Avshalom ultimately means, remember, minimum of days is 2, but it can't mean days because that's not enough to have a significant hair growth to warrant cutting it. So maybe it just means 2 years? To which the Gemara says, no. Donin yamim she'eni ma'im shanim, mi yamim she'eni ma'im shanim. To both say, when we're making a Gzera Shava, we'd rather make as pure of a Gzera Shava as possible. Therefore, we want to learn out Yamim from Yamim, and not Yomim by which it's written Shanim. So we'll say, here what's happening over here. By Avshalom, it uses the lashon of Yomim. Therefore, when making Gzera Shava, we'd like to find another place where it says Yomim. So, for example, by Bati Arichoma, it says Yomim. It says Yomim. But let's say in this other passage that the Gemara is going to by Himikates Shnasayim Yomim, it doesn't just say Yomim. What does it say? Shnasayim. So therefore, again, we'll say this is just the din in Gzera Shava. So Gzera Shava says whenever the purer the Gzera Shava, the better. What does it mean? How do you establish purity of Gzera Shava? The more similar the words are, the stronger the Gzera Shava. So if I have a choice between making a Gzera Shava between a pasuk that says Yomim and another pasuk that says Yomim versus a pasuk that says Yomim and another pasuk that says Shnasayim Yomim, I'd rather make the Gzera Shava with the pasuk that says plain Yomim. Therefore, again, we're back to the idea that Yomim means a year. But maybe Yomim means 30 days. After all, the Chsiv ad chodesh Yomim, the pasuk says up until chodesh Yomim, literally a month. Up until a month. So the Gemara says same answer. Danin Yomim she'ini ma'im chadashim mi Yomim she'ini ma'im chadashim va'ayachiach zeh sheyesh imo chadashim. Both say same thing. Because remember, we'll say we're trying to figure out what Yomim in the pasuk of Avshalom means. What does that mean? We know that he cut his hair. Yomim, Vahimi Kate Yomim. So again, if I have a choice between comparing it to another pasuk that says Yomim versus a pasuk that says Chodesh Yomim, I'd rather go with Yomim because that is a pure Gzeir Shava. Therefore, again, just like Yomim by Bata Arichoma means a year, so too Yomim by Avshalom also means a year. I ve'ima mehacha. But why don't we say from the following pasuk, Miyamim Yamima? So we'll say here, the Gemara is talking about Miyamim Yamima. Tilachna, I'm reading to the pasuk. Tilachna benos Yisrael lisanos lebas Yiftach Hagiladi arba'as Yomim Hashana. So we'll say, listen to this. Remember the story of Yiftach? So Yiftach was one of the Shoftim. So Yiftach makes a neder, and the neder, he says that if he's successful in battle, when he comes back from battle, the first thing that comes out of his house is going to be Kodesh LaHashem. It's going to be sanctified. What's the first thing that comes out of his house? His daughter. So remember, this is a tragic story where ego gets in the way, and Yiftach doesn't want to go to the Navi. The Navi doesn't want to go to Yiftach. And when ego gets in the way, often it's not the people with big egos who get hurt, but rather it's all the people around them. And Yiftach's daughter essentially is confined to a life of solitude. She never gets married. And so the Navi discusses that 4 times a year, her friends would go to visit her. Now, what the Gemara is presupposing over here is that those 4 times a year are equal intervals. So therefore, every 3 months, her friends would go to visit her. So what do you see from here? That Yamim Yamima means 3 months. So maybe that's the din also by Yiftach. Maybe by Yiftach, not by Yiftach, by Avshalom. Maybe by Avshalom, where we're describing a Nazir Olam, that Yamim means that he could cut his hair every 3 months. To which the Gemara says, Danin, again, same answer. Danin Yamim Miyamim, Ve'in Danin Yamim Miyamima. So we'll say the idea is, again, we're looking for purity of the Gzeir Shava. And purity of the Gzeir Shava dictates that if I have a choice between comparing the word Yamim to another pasuk where it's just Yamim, or if comparing Yamim to another pasuk where it's Yamim Yamima, I'd rather just go with Yamim. Umay nafkamina. So the Gemara says, what does this matter? Meaning, umay nafkamina. V'ha tanad v'rishmal v'shava koin u'ba koin. Zoi shiva v'zoi b'yis. So the Gemara says like this. Okay, so I understand what you're saying. At the end of the day, what you're saying is that you, Gemara, feel that strength of Gzeir Shava is most manifest in Gzeir Shava of 2 words that are exactly the same, as opposed to making Gzeir Shava between 2 words that are pretty much the same, but not textually exactly the same. Someone says, I don't understand. When it comes to making Gzeir Shava, we don't need the words to be the same. What's the right I will say? So the right without getting into the details over here, but there's a concept of tzaras habayis. Right? We know that a home is afflicted with tzaras. So the Gemara makes a Gzeir Shava between the process when the Kohen comes to the home and the process when the Kohen leaves the home. And how does the Gemara make that Gzeir Shava? V'shav HaKohen u'ba HaKohen. To equate the processes of the Kohen coming into the home and the Kohen leaving the home. I will say, so the Gemara makes a Gzeir Shava like that. Now, why is that an incredible Gzeir Shava? Because the words are not even the same. Right? The only word that's the same there is what? It's Kohen. But it's 2 different animals. But again, it is Gzeir Shava because both represent the Kohen and his interaction with the home, going into the home, coming out of the home. If you take a quick look at Rashi says, V'shava Kohen u'ba Kohen zohi shiva v'zohi bia. The same halachos for coming into the home are the same halachos for leaving the home. Ma bia mi beiso shal Kohen lebeis hamenuga choletz v'kotza v'tach v'nosein shavo la'askiro avkan b'shiva. So also the same way that when the Kohen leaves his home and goes into the home that has the questionable tzaras, if it's questionable, they scrape it out, they let the home sit for another 7 days. So too, when the Kohen comes back a week later to look at it again, if it's still there, they give it another week. So they equate the 2 processes of the Kohen coming in the first time and the Kohen coming in the second time, with the idea being that we make a Gzeir Shava with even 2 dissimilar phrases. To which the Gemara says, you're right. To which the Gemara says, okay, I agree. Can you make a Gzeir Shava between 2 dissimilar words? Yes. But when do we do that? When there is no similar word with which to make the Gzeir Shava. But if there is a similar word to affect the Gzeir Shava, I'd rather use a similar word. So I'll say, therefore, in our case over here, we're looking to figure out by Avshalom, who was a Nazir Olam, we're looking to figure out what Yomim means. We know that he cut his hair Yomim. So now, okay, I understand. Can I make a Gzir Shava between Yamim and Yamim Yamima, or Yamim and Shnasayim? Yes. Can I do it? Do I have the license to do it? Absolutely. But if I have a choice between making a Gzir Shava with a word that is similar but not exactly the same, versus a Gzir Shava with a word that is exactly the same, then of course it halachically behooves me to make the Gzir Shava with the word that is exactly the same. Therefore, again, because I have another Yamim by Bate Arechoma, therefore I choose to make the Gzir Shava ultimately with that word. And just like by Bate Arechoma means a year, so to by Nazir Olam it also means a year. Ika da Amri, there are others who explain. Menaya dinan dechot tlasa yarchin chadzimna dilma arba'a zimni b'shasa inami arba'a yarchin chad zimna train yarchin b'chadzimna. So we'll say the other issue is, remember that this is actually quoting from the pasuk of Yamim Yamima by the daughters of Yiftach. So we'll say, see, that one sounds actually like a pretty good argument, because you're saying Yamim Yamima means they went to visit her 4 times a year, which we assume means that every 3 months. To which the Gemara says, how do you know it means that they went at 4 equal intervals throughout the year? Perhaps again the Gemara says, perhaps they went inami arba yarchin chazin. Maybe they went after 4 months one time, and then after 2 months another time, and then after another 4 months one time, and after 2 months. So, I mean, how do you know that it means they went every 3 months? It just tells us they went 4 times throughout the year without telling us at all that it was at equal intervals. So that's just another answer. Meaning, so the Gemara gives 2 answers as to why we can't learn out from Yamim Yamima. Either number 1, because why should we? Why should we learn out from Yamim Yamima if we don't have to? If we have, again, another explicit Yamim. And number 2, who's to say that Yamim Yamima means every 3 months to begin with? Rabbi no. So that's the first opinion. So the first opinion was the opinion of Rabbi, namely that halacha l'maisa, that a Nazir Olam has the ability to trim his hair once every year. That was the first shita. Rabbi Norai says, Rabbi Norai Omer, Megalech achas l'shloshim yom. Rabbi Norai says that a Nazir Olam could trim his hair once every 30 days. So the Gemara says, my taima, why is it that he could trim his hair every 30 days? Gabikonim mishum di'ika kovet, hachanami ika kovet. Because the Gemara says that is the din by Kohanim, right? A Kohen Hedyot must trim his hair every 30 days in order that his hair does not become too heavy. So we see that within a month, hair could become quote-unquote heavy. Therefore, the Nazir Olam also has a license to trim. Now, let's remember, he's only permitted to trim his hair in a certain way, only with the razor, right? So again, he's not permitted to take a full haircut, but he could trim his hair once every 30 days. That's Rabbi Norai. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Megaleach me'erev Shabbos, erev Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi says, no, literally he could trim his hair once a week. Once a week. So the Gemara says, Ma'ika beinei l'shar achoi. So we'll say, remember, again, here's what's interesting. Now, where did Rabbi Yossi get this? Rabbi Yossi got this because Bnei Malachim, because children of the king, royalty, cuts their hair every single week. Okay, so now the Gemara has something very interesting. So if that's the case, that what was the difference between Avshalom and his brothers? Meaning that his brothers were also taking a haircut once a week, and now you're telling me Avshalom was a Nazir, Olam was also taking a haircut once a week. So what was the difference between Avshalom and his brothers? Oh, I'll tell you. The Gemara says, I'll tell you what the difference was. Yom Tov shechalios be'emtza Shabbos. Listen to this. If Yom Tov fell out in the middle of the week, da'achoi megalchin, hu lo megaleh. So we'll say, if Yom Tov falls out in the middle of the week, that there's a din, that's what? There's a din to take a haircut, to shave before Yom Tov. So his brothers would do so, but Avshalom, who was a Nazir Olam, did not have a license to do so. He only had a license to trim his hair on Erev Shabbos. Inami, the other possibility is, legaluchim in safar demale shabsa, to take a haircut early on Friday morning. Achoi megalchin, ihu lo megaleach at panya. So his brothers were able to do so, but a Nazir Olam is only permitted to go ahead and take a haircut later on in the day. So we'll say, so this is the fundamental machlokes. Just so you should know, how do we paskin? The way the Rambam paskins is that if a person is a Nazir Olam, an eternal Nazirus, so he paskin like Rebbe, and the Nazir is permitted to trim his hair once a year. Once a year. So says the Gemara, just as an aside, Mem Shana, Hani Arbaim Shana, Maya Vedetayu. If you remember again, the pasuk by Avshalom, which by the way is the pasuk that discusses the beginning of Avshalom's revolt against David HaMelech. He uses this pretext of going to Hebron to offer up his kabbanos, and when he's in Hebron is when he sounds the trumpet and says that he's the king. So the Gemara asks the following. The Gemara says, it was in the 40th year. So the Gemara asks, 40th year of what? So the Gemara says, it's actually very interesting. Rabbi Norai, Omer Mishum Rabbi Yoshua, Lekate Mem Shana, Shesha'ulu Lahen Melech. It was 40 years after the anniversary that we asked for ourselves a king. Tana Osa Shana Shesha'ulu Lahen Melech, Hishnas Es L'Shmuel Haramasi. Because the year we asked the king was the 10th year that Shmuel was the Shoved. So you understand the what's the word? Like the meaning in that. There's a lot of controversy in terms of last week's parsha, in terms of asking for a king, and whether it was right or not. There's one thing that was clear, which was that asking for a king was a terrible slight to Shmuel Hanavi. Because Shmuel Hanavi, he spent his life literally leading Klal Yisrael, and essentially what they said to him is, you're not really good enough, we need a king. And the truth is, Klal Yisrael in general, asking for a monarchy is not so pashut. We have a king. It's not so pashut that we should want a human king. And that's why the monarchy was fraught with issues from its inception. And interestingly enough, the rebellion of Avshalom occurs on the 40th anniversary of the request of the king. Okay, so says the Mishnah, Stam Nazir Islam Yom. We'll say if a person takes an Nazir, just remember, now just so you follow the progression here, so we spoke about a Nazir Olam, where a person becomes a Nazir forever. We spoke about a Nazir Shimshon, which essentially is like a Nazir Olam in terms of its duration, but again, it's different in some of its specific halachas. Let's say if a person just says, Hareini Nazir, I'm a Nazir. But it doesn't quantify the time. So the Mishnah says, Stam Nazir Islam Yom. If you don't quantify the time, the assumption is that the duration of your Naziros is 30 days. So the Gemara says, so where do we know that from? Amarav Masna Makra Kadosh Yihya. This is amazing because the pasuk says that the Nazir Kadosh Yihya, he will be Kadosh. Yihya b'Gematria Tlasin Havu. So Yihya in Gematria is 30. Now I will say, this is interesting. The Gemara doesn't often use Gematria. And remember, the Gemara's Gematria is different than ours. This is not like, egos plus 22 minus 1, equals chem. So you shouldn't this is, when the Gemara uses, the Gemara understands that there is absolutely something to numerical values. And therefore, again, especially when the Torah puts in a word that doesn't really need to be there. Like, I don't even need this phrase at all. But if we just be Kadosh, why Kadosh Yiyeh? So the Gemara understands that Yiyeh is coming to teach me something, namely that in the pasuk is teaching the inherent, or I should say, the most basic duration of a Neder Nazirus, which is 30 days. Because again, the numerical value Yud Yud and then Hey Hey ultimately is 30. Bar Pada says, Kineged Nazir Nizro Ha'amurim B'Torah Lamid Chaser Achas. Well, it's very interesting. Bar Pada says, no, where do we get 30 from? Because there are 30 times, actually 30 times minus 1, which is 29 times that the word or the root Nazir or Nizro appears in the Torah. So the fact that that root or that word appears 30 times indicates to us what? That Lamaisa, again, the Stam Neder Nazirus, an unqualified Nazirite vow, extends for 30 days. Rav Masna Nami Nelif Mi Nazir Nizro. So we'll say Rav Masna goes to the Gematria of Yihya. Why doesn't he learn it out also from the number of times that Nazir Nizro is mentioned in the Torah? Amar Lacha Hu L'Drasha. He says you can't use that to learn out the duration of Naziros. Why? Because those words actually teach us stuff, right? Those words teach us things. For example, miyayin v'shechar yazir. For example, when the pasuk says that the yazir shall abstain from wine and from shechar, yazir, le'asra yayin mitzvah. We're supposed to decide this yesterday. What does that teach us? That teaches us ultimately that yayin mitzvah, that mitzvah wine, is just as usher as we'll call it recreational or non-mitzvah wine. Ki afli lindor nezer lahazir melamed shanazirus chala al nazir. So he's just giving examples. So Maslan is giving examples of that, the fact that these extra words of what appear to be extra words of nazir or lahazir are not extra. We learn things out from them. Because we learn things out from them, they're purposeful. Therefore, they cannot just be used as for their not numerical value, but they cannot simply be used in a tally of 30 to teach me that Lamaisa Stam Neder Nazirus is 30 days. So, for example, the phrase of Lindor Neder Nazir Lahazir teaches us that Nazirus Chala al Nazir. So, we'll say, now we'll discuss it. If you take a look at Rashi for just a moment, last Rashi in Daf says, Shanazirus Chala al Nazirus. If a person says, I will be a Nazir if I eat this loaf, the Chazar, the Amar Harini Nazir im ochal kikar, when he says it again, I'm a Nazir if I eat this kikar, va'achla, and he eats the loaf, so Modeh Shtei Naziros, he has to count 2 durations of Naziros. So that's what it means, Nazir lahazir, that Nazirus chal on Nazirus, that literally one Nazirite vow can devolve upon an already existing Nazirite vow. So the point that Amasna is making is, Barpada, you make it sound like this root Nazir or lahazir appears 30 times in the Torah, and it's kind of just sitting there, so it must be there because of the importance of its combined numerical value. To which Ramah says it's not true. Each of those words, or some of those words, come to teach us things. Therefore, you can't just count them up and arrive at 30 and therefore say Stam Nejin Azirus is 30. That's why Rav Masna says, I prefer to go with the numerical value of Yihya Ubar Pada Amr L'cha. So we'll say, so what does Bar Pada respond to this? Bar Pada says, Amr L'cha, Lekachan Min Hon Delav Lidrasha, Ela Midahu L'Minyana Kulunami L'Minyana. So we'll say, so Bar Pada advances a very interesting argument. Bar Pada says, look, Master, I agree with you that there are some of them that are used for drashas, but will you not agree with me that there's not at least one that's not used for a drasha? To which Rav Masna will say, of course, there's more than one that's not used for a drasha. So Rav Pada will say, the fact that there's one that's sitting there that's not being used for a drasha tells me that l'maisa again, therefore it could be used to tell me the basic duration of an Eden Azirus, and the fact that one could be used teaches me that what? All of them can be used as well. Fine. So I'll say, so remember, interestingly enough, so it appears that Bar Pada and Amasna are not really arguing. I should say they're arguing as to the source, but agreeing as to the principle. But I will say, if you look carefully, they're not totally agreeing on the principle. Because remember, according to Bar Pada, how many Nazir Lahazir words does he count up throughout the Torah? 29. 29. So again, remember, and yet Rav Masna, from his numerical value, gets 30. So it says the Gemara Tanan, Stam Nezir Shloshim. So now the Gemara asks, what does our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah says that a Stam Neder Nezirus extends for 30 days. So Bishlam will Rav Masna Necha. So what's according to Rav Masna, who learns out from the Gematria of Yihya, the Yihya is 30. Okay, that makes the Mishnah make sense. Ella Bar Pada Kasha. But I also remember, Bar Pada only comes up with 29. He tries to make us, it's 30. He tries to make us think it's 30. Why he says, Shloshim Chas or Achos, 30 minus 1. Very nice. But, if we take off our shoes, so, we'll figure it out that we're really only up to 29. So therefore, again, the Mishnah says, Stam Neder Nazirus is 30 days. So what's happening over here? Bless you. Amar L'cha Bar Pada, Aidi Di'ika Yom Flossen Zemigaleach Umivi Karbanosov, Mishum Hachi Tana Shloshim. To which Bar Pada says, no. It's really 29 days of full Neder Nazirus. Because what happens on day number 30? So Bar Pada says day number 30 is the day that the Nazir shaves his head and he brings his karbanos. So really, when I say, when the Mishnah says 30 days, it means the entire process is 30 days. But how many real days of full-fledged Nazirus do you have? 29. Because on day number 30 is when you're bringing your karbanos and shaving your head. Therefore, again, Bar Pada says my drasha works. To which the Gemara says, well, 1 second. Tnan mi shomer harini nazir. If someone says I am a nazir, so what's the halacha? Megaleach yom shloshim ve'echad. No. We're going to see this machlokes later on. But here you have a Mishnah that says that if someone says I am a nazir, when is he bringing his karbanos and shaving his head? On day 31. On day 31. So you see from here that when the Mishnah says that Stam Neder Nazirus is 30 days, it really means a complete 30 days of Nazirus. And on day 31, you bring your karbanos. Bishlam Rav Masna. Shabbos, according to Rav Masna, works beautifully. Because he teaches me that there are 30 days of active Nazirus, and on day 31 is when I'm bringing my karbanos and shaving my head. However, El Bar Pada Kashya. But according to Bar Pada, it represents a kasha, to which the Gemara says, Amalecha Bar Pada Ema Seifa. Yet look at the end of that Mishnah. Im Gilach Liyom Shloshim Yatza. Then what does the Mishnah say? The end of the Mishnah say that if you shaved at the end of 30 days, you are Yotzei. So what do you see from here? So the Mishnah says it's true normally you go out and you do this on day 31, but if you did it on 30, it's good enough. You're Yotzei. So we'll say, so therefore Bar Pada will say, look, therefore I'm still correct. At the end of the day, in the purest form of the law, the basic requirement is you have 29 days of full-fledged Nazirus, and on day number 30 is when you're going in to bring your karbanos. And even though technically speaking, maybe we should bring it on day 31, but since technically if you brought it on day if you brought it on day 30, you're Yotzei. Therefore, I'm correct in saying that there are 29 days of full-fledged Nazirus. So the Gemara says, Ema Seifa, Megilach Liyom Shloshim Yatza, Ela Seifa Misayele, Reisha Naaseh Ke'omer Shleiman. Both said this is very important. So now, based on the Sefer, so the second part of that Mishnah, which is the statement that says that if you brought your karbanos on day number 30 or Yotzei, fine. So that salvages Bar Pada's Shita. However, I will say, what does Bar Pada do with the Reish? Remember, the first case of the Mishnah was that if a person makes a neder nezirus, so what lechatchila, when does he bring his karbanos? Lechatchila on day number 31. So what does Bar Pada do with that? So I'll say, this is amazing. To which Bar Pada will say, that has to be a case. Reisha naaseh ke'omer shleimin. So Bar Pada will say this. There is a case where a person says, Hareini nazir shloshim yom shleimin. That if a person literally makes a statement, I am a nazir for 30 complete days. So what does that mean? So even Bar Pada will agree that what is the duration of your active nazirus? What's the duration? 30 complete days. And when do you bring your karbanos? On day 31. So even Bar Pada will say, look, all I'm saying is that in the absence of any specified time frame, so I will say that the duration of a nazirus is 29 days. It's 30 days altogether, 29 of it active nazirus, 30th day bringing of karbanos and shaving of head. But if a person said that I'm a nazir for 30 days for shloshin yom shleimin, then enachinami, I would agree that lamaisa, it means that you're a nazir for 30 days and the karbanos are brought on the 31st day. Ella.
Do you actually say that, or it's
we consider? So we're going to see. So the lashon over here is naaseh ke'omer shleimin, which we'll have to see what that means, because that makes it sound like you're not actually articulating it, but it's as if you became it. So we'll see. So the Gemara says the following. Ul Rav Masna Kashya Seifa, according to Rav Masna. So now what we've done is we've worked out both the Reisha and the Seifa of the Mishnah according to Bar Pada. However, now the Gemara says that the Seifa poses a kasha according to Rav Masna. Now remember, what does the Seifa say? The Seifa says that if a Nazir went ahead and shaved and took a haircut and brought this, if he shaved his head and he brought his karbanos on day number 30, he's Yotze. Now that poses a kasha according to Rav Masna, because what did Rav Masna say? Rav Masna said the duration of a Nazir is 30 days, which seems to indicate to us, we assume that what that meant is when was he bringing his karbanos and shaving his head? When was he doing that? On the 31st day. Yet the Mishnah says that if he does it on the 30th day, or Yotze, says the kasha, kasavar miktsas hayom kekula. Both said is incredible. It's not a kasha, because Rav Masna holds that part of the day counts as the whole. In other words, that he observes his Nazirus until the morning of the 30th. Observing Nazirus on the morning of the 30th counts as if he's observed the entire 30th day. We've seen this concept in other areas like Avelos and other areas of halacha. Therefore, Lamaisa, again, that's fine. And he brings his karbanos on that very same day. Tanan. So we'll say, so this is the fundamental machlokes seen Bar Pada and Rav Masna. Again, so fundamental machlokes in terms of where Rav Masna learning out from Yiyah, Bar Pada learning it out from the number of times that the root Nazir and Israel is mentioned in the Torah. And again, now we see that these various Mishnayos, so we'll say, I'll tell you what's interesting. What's interesting over here is it could very well be that both Rav Masna and Bar Pada, according to where the Gemara is holding right now, will agree that you bring your karbanos on day number 30. They just disagree as to the mechanics of that. So according to Bar Pada, that's because day number 30 is not supposed to be part of active Nazirus. Day number 30 is your carbon haircutting day. You have 29 days of active Nazirus, 1 day of carbon haircutting. Rav Masna will say, no, you have 30 days of active Nazirus. But you don't. You only have 29 days and change. It's okay. Because there's a concept of Miktsas Yom Kekula, which means if you observe part of a day, halachically it counts as if you observe the entire day, just like we have Rahman al by Shiva. So Shiva is not Shiva never is 7 complete days, usually never is complete days. But the 7th day, remember, we observe a little bit in the morning, and that counts as if I've observed the entirety of the day. So to Rav Masna will say, I observed the morning of the 30th day of a Neder Nazirus. That counts as if I've observed the entire 30th day, and I bring my karbanos that day. So let's just do one more line. Knan. Hareini Nazir Shloshim Yom. So I am a Nazir for 30 days. Im Gilach Yom Lamed Lo Yatsa. But yet, again, I will say, what do you do with the following Mishnah? The Mishnah says that if a person says, I am a Nazir for 30 days, and then what happens? He shaved on the 30th day, he's not Yotze. So Rava said this seems to indicate to us that Lamaisa, when the shaving and hair cutting have to take place, has to take place on the 31st day, which contradicts everything we just said before, because we actually thought we were in a good place, where we both have Rav Masna and Bar Pada on the same page, that hair cutting and shaving can take place on day 30, and yet here the Mishnah is explicit in saying that if you shaved or you took your haircut, if you shaved your head, or you brought your kamaras on day 30, that you're not Yotze, to which the Gemara says, no, but Omer Shleimin. What's the case of it, Rabbi saying? The case over here is where Lamaisa, he said, Hareini Nazir Shloshim Yom Shleimin. I am hereby a Nazir for 30 complete days. So both Bar Pada and Rav Masna will agree that if a person says, I am a Nazir for 30 complete days, what does 30 complete days mean? 30 complete days meaning, and again, according to Bar Pada, 30 complete days, according to Rav Masna, means that we will not say Mitzas Hayom Kikulo, we won't say part of the day counts as the whole. Rather, what? We'll go ahead and actively count 30 complete days, and everyone will agree that when you made that type of neder, then l'maisa, again, you bring your kabanos and you do your head shaving on day 31. I will say we'll stop over here. We'll pick up with the Mir Tashem Tanan tomorrow.